Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with another trope recommendation video. I have been having a lot of fun bringing these kinds of videos to you guys, and today we are talking about a specific type of romance hero. That is the flirty or irreverent hero. This is usually the type of hero that doesn't take life too seriously. They love to, of course, flirt with the heroine, get under her skin. I love these heroes so much because they are so entertaining. Usually these heroes are hilarious. Quite a few of the heroes I'm talking about on this list today are freaking hilarious, and I love that for pretty much all of them, they don't ever expect to fall in love, and so when they start falling in love for the heroine, it like knocks them on their ass. Let's go ahead and jump into these recommendations. I'm definitely going to have to do a part 2 pretty soon because I have at least 30 characters on this list, and I am not going to talk about all 30 of them today. I think I'm going to talk about maybe half of them in this video, so yes, part 2 is coming at some point. So the first character I have to bring up in this video is probably my favorite YA love interest, although that's saying a lot because there's a couple more on this list that I absolutely love with my whole heart too, but I have to bring up Thomas Cresswell from the Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Kerri Maniscalco. Now, this series as a whole has been very hit or miss for me, but Thomas is the best part of this series. The way that he is so devoted to Audrey Rose, the main character. You know, of course he does have this flirty, irreverent facade, but underneath that all, he knows who he wants. That's Audrey Rose, and he is going to do everything in his power to have her. I'm just obsessed with Thomas. He is just like everything a love interest should be. There are some quotes that he says to Audrey Rose that will just make you swoon. While I don't love this series, I would still recommend that you pick it up just for Thomas because that's how incredible of a character he is. I love him with my whole heart, but we have to move on. We just have to. Next up, we have Sam from the Diviner series. So he is the love interest for Evie O'Neill, who's kind of the main character of the series, but as the series goes along, there's definitely several major characters. So Sam is just freaking hilarious, and I love their meet cute because he literally pickpockets Evie. That's how they meet. Like, iconic, and then they end up together. Like, what? And of course he's also one of those heroes that when he's falling for Evie, he just like doesn't know what to do with himself. It definitely takes him aback. He is just such an entertaining character. Definitely one of my top favorite characters in the series, which is definitely saying something because there's so many lovable characters in the Diviner series. Next up, we have another like top book boyfriend, maybe book husband of mine. That is Adrian Ivashkov from the Vampire Academy and the Bloodline series by Rochelle Mead. Now, I feel like Adrian is such an underrated book boyfriend, and I feel like that's because a lot of people have only read the Vampire Academy series and they didn't continue on into the Bloodline series. Now, I loved him in the Vampire Academy series, but he's definitely more of like a featured and supporting character, whereas in the Bloodline series, he is a major character. He is the love interest for Sydney, our main character, and we love a hero who just falls hard for the heroine and will do whatever he can to convince her to give him a chance. What's also cool about Adrian is that he can go into people's dreams, and so a lot of their more romantic scenes are actually when he is in Sydney's dreams. And I know that sounds kind of creepy and like he is invading her privacy, but just trust me, it really works. My love for Adrian knows no bounds, and if you have not read the Bloodline series but you read Vampire Academy, like, what are you doing with your life? You are missing out on so much quality Adrian content. So next up, speaking of another top book boyfriend for me, this is Nikolai Lantsov from the Grishaverse, specifically the King of Scars duology. That is the duology that he is the most featured in, though I definitely think he could have been featured more. Yes, I'm throwing shade at Leigh Bardugo. She did a lot of weird things with that duology, but that's number one in my mind, that she didn't feature the main character enough. Anyways, we first meet Nikolai in the original Grishaverse trilogy, and he is absolutely my favorite character of that trilogy. He might be my favorite character of the Grishaverse in general, which I know is saying a lot because there are some incredible characters in the Six of Crows duology. But Nikolai is just everything to me. His humor is hilarious. He has this very like self-deprecating type of humor that's just very charming, and I am just obsessed with his romance with Zoya in the King of Scars duology, but I also would have liked to have seen more of their romance in that duology. But yes, Nikolai is just top tier. So let's move on to adult romances now that I've talked about plenty of my favorite YA love interests. First up, we have Jeremy from The Duke Who Didn't. I think I'm going to focus on historical romances first. So the title is referring to the fact that Jeremy is a duke, but he literally does nothing with that title. He doesn't take life seriously at all. His love interest, I believe her name was Chloe. I believe they're childhood friends. This is like a childhood friends to lovers story. And Chloe takes life very, very seriously. She makes lists for herself and she adheres to them, and she's very goal oriented, where, like I said, Jeremy is just the opposite. And he's probably one of the funniest romance heroes that I've ever read about. Like, he had me chuckling out loud with pretty much every line he said in the book. Like, yeah, there were very few times where I wasn't laughing at something Jeremy said. And he's also very sweet. He does fall very hard for Chloe, and he's also a virgin hero. We love that trope. I need to make a recommendation video for that trope as well. And yeah, he's just really entertaining. I need to read more from Courtney Milan. Now that I'm thinking about it, I keep forgetting to delve more into her backlist. Next up, we have Galen from Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. This is a classic historical romance. If you are getting into this genre, this is a book that you absolutely need to read. I believe the heroine's name is Hester? Isn't that her name? So they're both working in the Underground Railroad. There is an event that happens where Galen gets seriously injured, and so the beginning is a caretaking scene where Hester's taking care of him. What's interesting about Galen is that he seems very serious at the beginning, obviously because of the situation that he's in, but also because of the work that both he and Hester are doing. But we see once he recovers that he's actually very charming, very flirtatious. He gives me very, very strong vibes of Prince Naveen from the Disney movie The Princess and the Frog. Like, that's who I was seeing in my head. Like, the whole time I was reading this book, a lot of his dialogue gave me those vibes. Again, very charming, very flirtatious, seemingly irreverent, just a wonderful, wonderful historical romance hero. Next up, we have Colin from A Week to Be Wicked by Tessa Dare. We love Colin. Colin is a mess. His life is a mess. He doesn't know what he's doing. He is a Viscount. But there are people in his life that want him to take life more seriously, and he's just not about that. But Minerva comes into his life. She's much more serious than Colin. She's very bookish. She's shy. She's also a scientist. She's basically a paleontologist, and so they make a deal that they'll pretend to be engaged for a week so that they can travel to Scotland together, where she can go to this like scientific convention of some sort. It's basically a road trip romance. Lots of hijinks ensue. And just like with all these other heroes, he of course is very flirtatious, very charming. But what's interesting about Colin is that he has a tragic backstory, and I love how that plays into the romance, and I also just love his character development. Minerva has some great character development as well, but Colin, he is just wonderful. Love him so much. I could not do a recommendation video about this type of hero without mentioning arguably one of my favorite heroes in recent years. That is Kit from The Lady Gets Lucky by Joanna Shupe. I talked about this book quite a bit in a recent video where I talked about teach me romances, or romances that feature lessons in seduction or sex. And so Kit and Alice make this deal that he will help her with these lessons in seduction so that she can attract a husband, because she has a terrible mother that she needs to get away from, if she will help him with opening up a supper club. And Kit is just like a perfect hero to me, basically. He of course has this very irreverent facade, but that facade was kind of put upon him by his own father. And he's definitely one of those heroes that never thought that he would get married. He doesn't want to get married. He doesn't want to be in a monogamous relationship, but he cannot help but fall for Alice, and of course vice versa. And oh man, the way that he loves and treats Alice is just everything, and I could talk about this man for hours. So I have a couple more historical romance heroes to talk about, and speaking of Joanna Shupe, I have to bring up Jack Mulligan from The Devil of Downtown, which is book 3 in her Uptown Girl series. Now, it's actually hard for me to pick between Kit and Jack, who my top favorite Joanna Shupe hero is. I love both of these characters with my whole heart. And Jack is a very interesting character because in the first 2 books of the series, he's kind of been built up as this villainous character. He's been in the background kind of the first 2 books. And so in this 3rd book, when Justine, our heroine, goes to meet him, she has this idea about him, but he's actually very charming, so swoon worthy. And you can also tell that Joanna Shupe took inspiration for Jack's character from the main character of Peaky Blinders. Now, I haven't actually watched that show, but I've seen clips from it, and I definitely get that kind of vibe for Jack. I want to bring up Christian from The Devil and the Heiress by Harper St. George. This is the kind of typical historical romance plot where you have your depraved English nobleman and your innocent American heiress. And there are so many things I love about this book, and quite a few of them have to do with Christian, our hero. Once again, we have a hero who doesn't expect to fall for the heroine. In fact, he kind of has this scheme going in terms of kind of seducing Violet, the heroine, but of course he ends up actually falling for her, and so things get complicated in that way. He also has kind of a leg injury, so he walks with a walking stick, and why is that so attractive? I don't know. And I think he co-owns like a fighting club, so we do see a couple of scenes of him like fighting with one of his friends. He's also very supportive of Violet. She writes romance novels, and from the beginning he's just very supportive of that. He actually wants to read her work, and there's kind of like a marriage in trouble vibe going on towards the end of this book, and the grand gesture he does for Violet is incredible because we love acts of service as the grand gesture. That's all I'm gonna say. All right, we have one more historical romance hero to talk about. That is Leo from the Hathaway series by Lisa Kleypas. What's so amazing about Leo is that this is a 5-book series where each book, of course, centers on the romance of a different Hathaway sibling, but throughout those 5 books, you get to see Leo's complete character development. At the beginning of book 1, he is drunk all the time. He has no will to live, essentially because the love of his life passed away, I believe, a couple years before book 1 starts. And basically because he's drunk all the time, he can be very mean to his siblings. He's not doing well. His life is quite a mess. And so we see this character arc from book 1 where he eventually sobers up and we get to see his true personality. He's very funny, very charming, of course irreverent, like we love that type of hero, which is of course why I'm making this video in the first place, right? And then he meets Catherine Marks, who is the governess for the Hathaway siblings, specifically the younger 2 Hathaway sisters. And so throughout the books of the series, his romance is in book 4, but we get to see how he flirts with Catherine and how he gets under her skin, and then by book 4 we see just how much he absolutely loves Catherine. And he might be my favorite Lisa Kleypas hero to date. I really love Leo, and I feel like he's also one of Lisa Kleypas's few like rake, irreverent, flirtatious type heroes. I feel like she tends to write maybe more serious kinds of heroes, but I love how entertaining Leo is. So yes, I of course had to mention him in this video. So let's move on to some contemporary romance recommendations. I actually don't have many here because I think I'm gonna mention more of them in my part 2 of this trope. But I do want to mention Lucas from 40 Love by Olivia Dade. So what's really interesting about this romance is we have an older heroine. I think she's just about 40. Can't remember her name, of course. And then we have Lucas, who's 26. They meet when the heroine is on vacation. Basically, Lucas was a pretty famous tennis player, and now I think he went through a terrible injury. And so now he just works as a tennis coach for people that are staying at this resort, and their meet cute is absolutely hilarious because our heroine's bikini top falls off when she's swimming in the ocean, and so Lucas is the only one in the vicinity of what's happened, and so she begs him to come out into the ocean with her and to like cover her up basically so she can get back to her, I think she had a towel laying out on the sand or something. And it's just so funny because Lucas is kind of like making fun of her the whole time, but of course he also wants to help her out, and so things just go on from there. This is also the kind of romance where Lucas, our hero, desperately wants to be with the heroine, but she's very hesitant because of the age gap, and so he just does everything he can to convince her that they belong together. There's also a quality caretaking scene where the heroine has her period and Lucas is just so sweet and caring for her. Next up, I have to talk about Henry from Royally Matched by Emma Chase. Henry is the epitome of the type of hero who doesn't take life seriously. His life is a mess basically, but he can't afford to be a mess because he's now the crown prince of Westco, which is the fictional country that this series takes place in. And so the real catalyst for this plot is that he agrees to do this bachelor type TV show where 20 women from Westco who are all of nobility are competing to win his heart. But instead he falls in love with, I believe the heroine's name is Sarah, who is the sister of one of the contestants on the show. And she is like the opposite of Henry in every way. She's incredibly shy, very bookish. She actually has a chronic illness, and I thought that that representation was done really well. And the way that Henry falls so hard for Sarah, the heroine, so quickly too, is just so swoony and is just absolutely everything. Next up, we have Clay from Blindside by Candy Steiner. I read this one pretty recently as well. I also featured this in my sex lessons video. There are so many amazing tropes in this book because we've got the fake dating, we've got the sex lessons, and we have Clay, who is seemingly irreverent and of course very flirtatious with Gianna. What's interesting about Clay is that he's one of the very few heroes of this trope that I've read about that actually isn't opposed to monogamy, because at the beginning of the book he just got broken up with by his long-term girlfriend, and so he's actually very heartbroken over that. He thought that he was going to marry this girl, and so that's kind of where the fake dating comes into play, is that he wants to make his ex jealous, whereas Gianna has her own motivations. And Clay actually gives me vibes a little bit of Kit from The Lady Gets Lucky by Joanna Shupe, in how their like friends to lovers romance progresses and how he truly cares for Gianna. Basically, Gianna comes to him for sex lessons just because she's trying to date this other guy, but she's very nervous about seriously dating someone because she's a virgin. She has zero experience in intimacy or anything like that. And so she trusts Clay enough to come to him for lessons. And you can tell that he takes that very seriously, but at the same time, he has a lot of fun with that because he steals some of her romance books where she's tabbed some of her favorite sex scenes, and he takes notes from them and uses them when he's with Gianna, and it's just like absolutely everything. I love both of these characters so much. Like, just don't be surprised if this book ends up being one of my top favorite romances of 2022. Just so freaking good. So I have two heroes left that I want to talk about. First up is Bennett from Bright Like Wildfire by Juliet Cross. This is also a very recent read of mine. If you want to hear my in-depth thoughts about both this book and Blindside by Candy Steiner, I will link my most recent reading vlog up in the cards above, where I vlogged the Romance Takeover Readathon, and so I read both of those books during that week. But Bennett, what I love about him, first of all, is that he is like super talented. He's like a triple threat. He's a song and dance man, but he's also a pretty amazing actor. But his day job is that he owns a supermarket, but he also participates heavily in the local community theater. And so one of the things we hear about quite a bit is how amazing he was as Billy Flynn from the musical Chicago. But the main part of this plot is that Bennett is starring in a straight play, I believe by Neil Simon, with Betty, our heroine. They are the leading man and leading lady. They have to play a married couple. And so basically this kind of gives like a frenemies to lovers vibe, because Betty kind of has a grudge against Bennett about something that happened in high school. But I love how he like breaks through her walls. She is a very guarded heroine, and for very good reason. I actually related to Betty quite a bit. And one of the things I just adored about Bennett is how, yes, he can be very flirtatious with her just to get under her skin, but he can also be very tender and loving towards her. There is one sex scene in particular in this book. If you've read this book, you will know what scene I'm talking about. Just the way that he takes care of Betty and makes sure that she is okay and makes sure that she is enjoying herself is honestly beautiful to me. It's probably one of the most unique sex scenes that I've ever read because of how his character reacts to and behaves with Betty, and yeah, I love Bennett. All right, last but not least, we have to talk about Raylan from Broken Vow by Sophie Lark. Now, Raylan is kind of different from a lot of the other heroes that I'm featuring in this video, because while he does give off that irreverent vibe, mainly to get under Riona's skin, who is the heroine in this story, he also has a very, very serious side to him because he has military training. He essentially becomes Riona's bodyguard, and he takes that incredibly, incredibly seriously. He's also what I would say is like a Cinedom kind of hero, which is another trope that I need to make a recommendation video about. But basically that just means that he's very playful and flirtatious and charming in day-to-day life, but in the bedroom he turns quite serious and quite dominant, and it is everything. I love Raylan with my whole heart. This is my favorite book of the Brutal Birthright series. So that's going to be it for this recommendation video. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to leave even more recommendations for this type of romance hero, because I just eat that shit up. I love flirtatious and irreverent heroes so much. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do. And with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!